Hey, St. Paul, this is Pastor Justin here, coming to you to talk a little bit about homelessness and our faith. For the month of October, St. Paul has been focusing on homelessness and people experiencing homelessness. The image that you see on this homepage of this presentation is found as art installation that is called Jesus the Homeless. We have here a person on a park bench like setting, and the only way that we can tell that it is Jesus is the pierced feet that we see it there. But to understand that even our faith and our leader of our faith, Jesus, as someone has experienced homelessness, is sometimes kind of a controversial understanding of our faith. But our faith has experienced homelessness throughout scriptures, and for all kinds of different reasons, the people of God have experienced homelessness. But do the people of God also deserve safe places to dwell? And is it a part of our scriptures to understand that there is a place on earth for us to have our home? The first person that comes to mind that experienced homelessness in our scripture is Joseph. Joseph here had an experience with his brothers in which the brothers threw him in a pit and wanted to kill him and wanted to send him off. He then ultimately gets sold into a caravan of Ishmaelites and set off into homeless. And throughout um, Joseph's time, he was homeless and imprisoned multiple times. And one of the things about Joseph is it was often his difference or his dream understanding or how he was different that often got him in trouble and often made it so that he experienced homelessness. Ultimately, in the end, Joseph gets a home in the place of the emperor who trusted and wanted to experience the God of the Israelites. And at the end, um, Joseph's brothers were forced into homelessness due to famine and had to come to Joseph for food and for shelter. So the story of Joseph is an experience of homelessness in which often homelessness is something out of your own control. For Joseph, at first was out of his control because of what his brothers could do, but also his brothers' homelessness was out of their control due to the famine, and the place in which they were living became uninhabitable. The Israelites, for the need of justice, found themselves homeless when they went into the wilderness of sin. They decided to that the experience of being a slave was not a part of God's plan for them, and God made a plan for them to be homeless or to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And in that experience, they were homeless and lawless and had to create a whole new life together. And here we have the Israelites as a homeless nomadic people wandering in the wilderness, and God creating and making a safe place for them wherever they ended up dwelling. Again, a situation with homelessness was kind of a choice of deciding to leave the Israelite captivity by the Egyptians, but also there was a false choice in which do you want to do you want to choose between slavery or freedom, and ultimately you're going to choose freedom. And so in this position, the Israelites were homeless, but they also had a promised land, which we will talk about in a few minutes here. To think of Jesus as a homeless person is sometimes a little controversial, but I think onto a modern definition and even a definition of the biblical times, you could understand that maybe he would be someone who was experiencing homelessness. Here's we have the passage in which Jesus was kicked out of his home synagogue after reading passage from Isaiah, and he sits down, and ultimately he almost gets thrown off a hill, and he never ends up going back home. And he also has some struggle with his family and his mother later on. He speaks later on of his struggle with homelessness when it comes to this fairly famous verse where, teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. a lot of Jesus's time was nomadic and homeless in the sense in which he would travel. The Jewish people would provide shelter for him, and he would have a place to be. He would teach his disciples how to live as a homeless person when it comes to receiving um, gifts and receiving shelter from people. But there was a real idea that Jesus and his disciples were people who were nomadic and people who did not and experience homeless. And actually, it wasn't until the end of this story where when Jesus died that the disciples were dejected and kind of went home. And so in the set in it and also part of the story is that the Israelites and Jesus talk about a promised land, and that there will be a promised land and a place for them to dwell and to call their own as a part of a swearing to Abraham, and that in that land they will be able to multiply their descendants and have these lands for those descendants to be. And that land and home is something that creates wealth and prosperity. If you create and have a home, it becomes a generational wealth because property values and the value of having property continues to either one that you can produce crop again over and over again, but also value of property always usually goes up. So the value of having land and it creates value in the people, and so that's part of the story of the uh, American exceptionalism of the post World War II, in which it was just really important to try to get as many people into home ownership for the sake of the continued wealth and the developing wealth that you get while owning land. So in Scripture, homelessness takes many different forms, anywhere from being exiled to being kicked out of the land that you are in and forced relocation into other lands where you don't have ownership or you don't have private property. We have abandonment, where you have someone like Joseph who was abandoned and is kicked out of homes and are on the streets, or as what they said, the pit, or by choice that you can't live in the home that you have due to the injustice or the oppression or the unfitness of the current home. So homelessness is something that is part of our faith story and history. It's a part of who we are. It's part of our story, and it's often this story of trial and tribulations, but also the story of having a promised land. And homelessness is a phenomenon that can be forced upon you in something of your own doing. And oftentimes being quote unquote different leads to homelessness. When you're not able to fit within the system in which you were born in, or the oppressive system that you are stuck in, being different often leads to being homeless. So oftentimes homelessness was also a consequence of an unjust system. Someone may be able to be in a place or be in a house, but the unjust system comes in and kicks them out. And so oftentimes homelessness is a consequence of an unjust system in our scriptures. So the question that I want to leave you with is the understanding, is home a promised land? Does the Christian faith, does our faith tell us that everyone is entitled to safe housing and faith? I hope you find ways to engage in our stories of homelessness and our social justice agencies we've been working with this month, that you will see interviews with the three different agencies we are working with. They will also be posted on our YouTube channel, and find ways to participate in this month as we engage the experience of homeless. Take care, everyone.